Larry who? Never heard of her.
What sort of a man is he?
Dick from Bama.
A man like any other, but more so.
I thought he was dead.
This is the Larry Alex Taunton Show. Let's light this candle.
Welcome into the Larry Alex Taunton Show. I am Amie Beth Shaver. I have a question.
All right, lay it on me.
Is it normal for turtles to be in the middle of the road as you make your way to the, do we call this the palace, the lake area? I don't even know. But is that normal? Can I expect that?
It's funny you mentioned turtles because I was noticing from my desk yesterday something that kept popping up out in the lake. So I keep binoculars on my desk. And sure enough, it was a big snapping turtle. So I haven't seen any on the road lately, but it's not wholly unusual in the rural South. I
mean, I didn't stop for it, but I wanted to. I love turtles, so I thought, I need to ask Larry.
So you hit it?
Well, that's strong.
Did you straddle it, or did you hear the actual crunch?
I may have gone around it.
Okay.
But I did see it, and I needed to know if this was normal.
Okay. Well, it does happen, but if you get that really, nasty crunch sound, it's probably because you hit it.
Okay, well, we're just not going to talk about that. That'd be fine. All right, now listen, seriously. This week, get your newsletter, and I see that your byline is Mar-a-Lago, which, if you don't know this is ridiculous that this is your byline. What is it like when you're driving up down the drive in your Dodge Ram, obviously? I mean, because why did you drive that entire way?
We did because Mar-a-Lago, President Trump's, what should we call it? I mean, I don't even know if that's his primary home. I guess it is, but it's a resort, an estate, really impressive in Palm Beach. And I have to do so much international flying that I have a rule that anything less than 10 hours, I will drive it. And the reason for that is because, depending on where it is, because, if it's to D.C., I'll drive D.C. That's not too bad. If it's to New York, which is, of course, more than 10 hours, but I don't want to deal with the traffic and so on, so definitely fly. But, if you think about it, going to Palm Beach, I would probably have to go through Atlanta. Mm-hmm. I won't get a direct flight out of Birmingham. I got to be at Birmingham Airport 2 hours in advance. And then I fly to Atlanta. Then I'll have a layover there. I'll spend, 8 to 10 hours probably getting there. And then I have to rent a car when I get there. And this is a nice, easy drive. So Lori and I decided to just go ahead and drive it. And it's funny that you mentioned the Ram because when you're pulling into Mar-a-Lago or pulling out, you have to be approved by the Secret Service. And I was invited with one guest. Obviously, my guest was my wife. And, you can't change guests. If she gets sick at the last second, you can't say, and this is true of a White House function or something like that, that you can't change because they've already approved whoever that person is. The Secret Service has already done their background check. So you have to be approved going in. And in front of me, there is, one of these. This isn't the entry level Mercedes. This is the AMG.
Oh,
the really expensive big Mercedes, and then right behind me is a Porsche Cayenne. And here I am in a Dodge Ram 4x4, bug splattered on my windshield, a little mud, in the wheel wells.
Bring Alabama with you.
There we go. And, it was funny because when I was leaving, when we were, there are hundreds of people, standing, I don't know, maybe 500, 600 people attended this event. And, maybe 100 or more standing there waiting for their car. When mine pulls up, I turned to the crowd and I said, eat your heart out, all of you people who are driving Mercedes and BMWs, because she's all American. And they just erupted, with laughter.
Good.
So I thought, I'd have a little bit of fun with that. But yeah, we did drive down there. It was great. The event was wonderful. Mar-a-Lago, amazing.
So is it massive? Is it a massive estate / club?
I probably have to look at Google Earth or Apple Maps or something to get a feel for that. It felt very big, but you never have a lot of line of sight, because you are going through a tunnel, or you're going from one portion, one building into another. It felt like it was sprawling, like it just kept going. And then where we brought the vehicles in, it turns out that they brought the vehicles to another place when we were leaving. So it felt like it just kept going and going. How big it is, I don't know, but the real estate has to be worth an absolute fortune. But, we are gathered around a pool. I nearly knocked Rudy Giuliani, I have to say, into that pool. And not, by the way, because he offended me and I was deliberately planning to do this.
Right.
It is because Lori and I were standing for a photo, and he went to slip right behind me. There were only just a few feet, just behind me. And he's kind of a little guy, and I'm a fairly big guy. And then add to that, he's somewhat stooped. So when I turn, I don't really even see him because he's below my line of sight. And then we bump, and I thought, I just nearly put the former mayor of New York straight into Trump's pool, which probably would have made headlines. But anyway, we're gathered around that pool, and there's all kinds of different stations to get wine or champagne or water or whatever, and then different kind of food that's available. It's a beautiful place. It was beautiful weather. Mm-hmm. And there are all these beautiful people, in their tuxedos, and the ladies. And what do you call them? I always confuse them. Is it an evening gown or a nightgown?
It's an evening gown.
An evening gown.
It's an evening gown.
There we go. The evening gown that they're wearing that looks very beautiful. And I guess they weren't wearing nightgowns. And that they all look very, very formal. And you're going, hey, that's the governor of so-and-so. Hey, that's, the press secretary. That is, so it is interesting.
Yeah. So what were you doing there?
I was there for the film, the release, the premiere, the red carpet premiere of Dinesh D'Souza's new film, 2,000 Mules.
How was it?
It's good. Dinesh has become quite a filmmaker. He had a film about Obama, called 2016, that was quite good. He's learned to do this very well. And for those who don't know who Dinesh D'Souza is, Dinesh is he's a friend of mine. I've known Dinesh for quite some time, and we've hung out together a good bit over the years. And Dinesh, This is what he is really, really good at. Dinesh, if you're watching, if you're listening, I hope you don't mind when I say this. He had a foray into the Christian theological realm for a time. That's not where he belongs. And by that, I don't mean Dinesh isn't a Christian, or that you don't have interesting things to say on that topic. He was doing a lot of debates, with atheists,
right.
Christopher Hitchens and so on, which I chaired. But this is Dinesh's wheelhouse. I'll give you an example. Some years ago, he calls me and he tells me that he has a book that he's working on about Obama. And can he share it with me? And yeah, sure. So he says, I'll be in Birmingham. Can we get together and I'll lay out for you the whole thesis? I was in awe, honestly, as he laid out the thesis of the book that became The Roots of Obama's Rage.
Wow.
And that, I'm trying to remember I think the Roots of Obama's Rage might be the subtitle. But anyway, became a mega bestseller. The Obama administration had a press conference just to denounce the book, to say the book isn't true, it's not true at all. And I thought, Dinesh, he's a political operator who gets this. He really does. And he was basically making the argument, while others were saying at that time that he's a socialist, that Obama's a socialist, or the argument was, no, Obama is he's a Marxist. And Dinesh comes along and demolishes all of these different narratives. And he says, He's an anti-colonialist, just like his father. That's what he is. And he says, think about his very first act. Can you think of his first act as president of the United States? It's about a guy that we were just talking about off air, Churchill.
Oh, yes, he gave back the bust.
He gave back the bust of Winston Churchill. He said that everybody was having a hard time understanding that. What was that all about?
Right.
And he says because he sees Churchill as a colonizer. He sees him as an imperialist. Don't want you guys take him back. Not interested. And so this is what Dinesh is good at. So when it comes to a film like 2,000 Mules, this is where he belongs. It's a genius film.
So I know the premise, but what's the premise behind this? And do you think that he accomplished his purpose that he probably, I mean, I obviously think he did, but what's the premise of the movie?
The premise deals with the 2020 presidential election and massive voter fraud. So Dinesh is alleging not that there's a little bit of election fraud. And by the way, I for many, many years was one of those people who just believed our elections, they're sacrosanct. There's, Democrats, Republicans were all committed to voter integrity. The poll watchers make sure this stuff doesn't happen. And then I'll never forget former Alabama Governor Albert Brewer, who was a professor of mine. He's telling me that I think it was the 60 and 68 elections, but he was talking about LBJ and JFK. And he said there was massive voter fraud in Cook County, in Illinois, Chicago, and also in Texas, Louisiana, a variety of other places. And bear in mind, Albert Brewer was a lifelong Democrat. And he said Democrats were cheating like crazy. And he said they were throwing whole voter machines into ponds, rivers, lakes, this kind of thing. So that demolished my my thought that this kind of stuff never happened. Dinesh is arguing that it's still happening, but it's a machine. It's extremely well organized. And so the name 2,000 Mules, what that comes from is True the Vote, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to election integrity. It's really interesting what they do. They do a lot of it is statistical analyses, and they do it all over the world in elections because they're able to. And I'm kind of, these aren't necessarily the examples they would use, but it looks something like this. They can, by looking at previous elections, by looking at voter registration, by looking at previous voter trends, they flag different statistical anomalies where they're going, okay, it's kind of odd that last time this county voted overwhelmingly X, and this time they're voting overwhelmingly in the opposite direction. Flag that. That looks a little weird. Or they're thinking, there's more people voting here than there are registered voters, stuff like that. Well, what they started noticing here was they started using the language of, drug mules, drug traffickers. These were people, they called them ballot traffickers. And what ballot traffickers are, they're people who are going to, let's say primarily, very often that they're primarily poor and Hispanic districts, the elderly. Some think, by the way, that the in New York, confining the elderly to nursing homes, it was to ballot traffic. Now, I don't know if that's the case or not. That's a theory, but it's a theory that makes sense, meaning, ma'am, if you'll vote here, we'll take your ballot for you. Right. And now there are laws. Ballot harvesting in some states is legal. Ballot trafficking is a different thing. And by that, we mean that I pay you for your vote, and then I deliver it, meaning that, for instance, in the state of Alabama, a family member or a caregiver, an official caregiver, can deliver your vote for you. But I can't take your vote. I can't go deliver your vote. Amy, I'll do it. I'm a buddy of yours. I'll go handle this. You cannot do that. Furthermore, you cannot pay or in any way compensate someone for a vote. And they were doing this in a very big way. And then they're taking those ballots. Those ballots then go, this was all being done by Democrat 501c3s, nonprofits. Those ballots are then placed into duffel bags or boxes, and then the mules come along and they pick them up and they take them to a variety of ballot boxes. And you may say, well, how do they prove this? The way they prove it is genius and slightly frightening. It's kind of what we were talking about a little bit this morning. Your phone has what's called a UDID. It means unique device identification, identifier. Advertisers use it all the time. It's why they want your phone number. Just the other day, I'm right there at the restaurant at Jim and Nick's, and they're about to see me, and they say, "Can we get your number?" And why? You going to text me some barbecue? And I said, no, you can't have my number. Why do you want my number? Well, they want the number. They will say, well, so we can contact you when your table is ready, or something like, well, but I'm just right there. You're going to call me? No, what they're doing is they want to put that into their system so they can track you. And advertisers do this because if they know that, let's say 80% of their customers are moving along corridor A as opposed to corridor B, they know not to advertise on corridor B. We need to put our billboards all on corridor A. Well, what they did in this film is True the Vote was able, with the use of cameras on the boxes, the ballot boxes like this, and the camera sees this individual come, and it's 2:36 in the morning. They attach a UDID to that person, and then they follow that person. And it turns out that those people were going to 20, 40, 60, sometimes even 100 ballot boxes, and you see them wearing gloves and shoving loads of ballots into these boxes.
Because that's legal.
Because everybody votes at 2:36 in the morning.
They do.
With lots of ballots.
Obviously. Holy cow. So shoving hundreds.
Yes.
But on camera. So, okay, here's the question. In Atlanta, when the water pipes mysteriously burst, were those boxes of ballots that were under the table not supposed to ever have been seen? Was that a mistake?
I don't even recall the incident. Tell us about it.
So it was in Atlanta in the middle of the night. They kicked all of the people out.
The observers.
The observers, the regular people, kicked them out. And then, some of the ballot counters were seen dragging the boxes. And then putting them up. And I wonder, was that an oops moment?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
That happened in more than one place. And it's clear that not only that, but they're dumping loads of, if we know, for instance, that, this section of, suddenly I can't remember, what's the name of the county where Atlanta is?
Oh, Fulton County.
Fulton County. If we know that this section of Fulton County is overwhelmingly Republican, a lot of those ballots started going into dumpsters and things of that nature. And then mysteriously, think about what happened on election night, and they show you this in the film. A red wave starts sweeping the country. It's not only does it look like a slam dunk for Trump to win, it appears it's going to be a landslide.
Yes.
And then suddenly, boom, all stop. Vote counting stops in just about every swing state. And it's 6 states that they're following. I may not remember them all, but they're following in 2,000 Mules. They're in Georgia. They are in Texas. They are in, Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. And I believe that Biden ends up winning 5 of those 6, even though Trump is ahead in those states. And so what True the Vote does in this is it wasn't simply they followed a mule. They identified roughly 2,000 mules, hence the name of the movie. And my guess is, to me, I always think of it like a roach. I always say to Lori, if you see one, there's 100 in the walls that you are not seeing. It's not just one roach. We kill that one roach, we're good. The house, no, it means there's others. If there are 2,000 mules, there are probably 10,000 mules. And they get some of these mules on camera, with their voices changed and, they're blacked out, but they're telling how this works and what they're doing and how they're paid. Because this is what it looked like on video. This was so weird, is you'll see a car pull up, and again, it's usually between about 2 and 5 a.m. that these people are doing this. You'll see a car pull up or a bicyclist or somebody come and then take out of a duffel bag, a bunch of ballots and start shoving them in. They're wearing gloves, and the reason they started wearing gloves is because in the state of Arizona, which was one of the contested states, in the state of Arizona, these ballot traffickers, these mules, were prosecuted because they could identify their fingerprints. So right after that, they all start wearing gloves, surgical gloves. So they pull up, and they're often, wearing masks. In fact, I think they were always wearing masks or have a hood or something like that, so you can't identify them. And then they come up, start shoving them in, take their gloves off, throw it in the trash, and then sometimes you see them turn around and come back and take their phone and take a picture of the ballot box. Now, True the Vote, this was all True the Vote's research that was doing this. Dinesh, the popularizer of their research. He's the one who's getting their research out. What True the Vote discovered was, they're doing this to get paid because the nonprofit that is paying them, I mean, imagine Fixed Point Foundation, which is a 501c3, is a C3. If we were doing this, we would absolutely lose our tax-exempt status, probably go to jail. But they're doing this massively. This was happening all over the place. And so they had to prove to their superiors, we were at all the places you told us to go. Here's a picture of every ballot box we went to. We stuffed them in there. And so they began coupling this with videos of other places. And you see, not every ballot box has a camera on it. So they were only able to do it at some of them. And they would tell them to spread out the ballots. Don't take all 1,000 of them and shove them into one place. That looks too suspicious. So you'll put 50 here, 50 there, 100 here, this kind of thing. So it was organized and it was widespread.
So I number one, it sounds like door dashing ballot style, because when people deliver our food to our house, take a picture of it, send it on. But the bigger question is, okay, so they're funded
I like
by
that. That's good.
An organization. Who's funding them? Who's paying for these people to drop these ballots off?
Well, donors, just nice people who are
sweet,
for
good, just lovely humans.
They're 501c3s, they're charities, and so people are just giving to this. I don't know that I'm trying to think about in the film, and I should say I will watch the film again because during the film you have people come up and tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, Larry, it's good to see you. It's nice to meet you." Yeah, and you start chatting to someone during that. Sam Sorbo did that. Kevin Sorbo, did that. How dare you? While I'm trying to watch this film, so I don't recall that they ever mention the actual donors to these, but I mean the usual suspects, I'm sure, are funding this in a big way.
Okay, wow. All right, so how long is the movie? Like 2 hours?
It's probably about 90 minutes.
Okay,
I would guess, and you can watch it online. It's very well done. But I let me just say this: when I went to see the film, I believed that there was massive voter fraud, but I thought Dinesh can't prove it. I mean, that's, my son is an attorney, and we talked about this an awful lot. Dad, it's one thing to know in your bones. It's quite another to demonstrate in a court of law beyond all doubt that this is what happened. I think this movie comes about as close as you can come to achieving that, because I didn't know anything about the UDIDs.
Yeah.
I thought they would say, well, we just have a video of some people stuffing ballot boxes, which of course looks suspicious and it looks really, really bad. But coupled with the UDIDs, they then show you a map and they say, let's show you where Mule 1 went. As soon as he left here, he went to this ballot box, to this ballot box, to this ballot box, to this ballot, and it just keeps going. And then they said, along the way, he's making these odd stops. So we went to look, what is this address that he's going to? It's a Democrat 501c3.
Imagine that. That's such a surprise.
Yes, he's not stopping and picking up a bagel. He's going and picking up more ballots and then going again. And by the way, I have to throw this little gem in there. There's a bomb in the room. Before we take a break, I have to say this. They tracked some of these same people to Antifa riots. So you see, this whole thing is an organized mob that they're being used to. They're your Insta mobs. They're your ballot traffickers. They're your the people are throwing bricks through your windows and burning your businesses. That's what this is about. And I will guarantee you that if we were to track them, we would find that some of them are standing out on Brett Kavanaugh's lawn, right now, protesting Roe v. Wade. I mean, that's what these people do. This is what they do for a living. They're professional disruptors.
Wow. All right, so I have a few more questions for you, but we'll take a break and I'll save them.
All right, perfect.
This is the Larry Alex Taunton Show.
Larry is my favorite player.
All right, so welcome back. A couple of questions before we transition. I've got a big one about Roe v. Wade. But do you really think that as far as 2,000 Mules go and people becoming more clever as they outsmart what's going on, is there really not any hope?
You mean to end election fraud?
Yeah.
I won't say there's no hope. There is hope because a lot of people are seeing this film. There are millions of Americans who are very concerned about these things and want to do something about it. The hope is in them actually doing something about it. That means voting out those politicians who refuse to address it. It means taking a stand on these issues. That might mean a protest. It might mean a letter to your congressman, your representatives locally. A lot of these things are happening at the local level. It matters who your attorneys general are. It matters who your election officials are. And see, it's important to know that the left, they target these key positions, these levers of power that you're not really paying attention to. So it's kind of like we're all part of a homeowners association, and 70% of the people want to be left alone, and you have no interest in becoming the president of the homeowners association, but they do, and suddenly they're slapping down all kind of regulations on you. You're going, wow, how did this happen? I mean, nobody I know in here, is in favor of all this crazy stuff. It's because they've managed to gain the levers of power. And this is what they're doing at the state and local levels, not just to say the federal levels. This stuff is happening at a local level, and that's where you got to stop it. We need conservatives in these positions.
We really do. And so the question is, why does it seem that conservatives, the right, I don't know, it appears to me that we are a step behind. Am I wrong? Am I off?
I have lots of theories about this. One of them is theological, actually. In Luke 16, you have the story of the shrewd manager, if you know that story. And it's a very interesting story. I'll leave it to others to go and read that story. But at the end, Jesus, in summing up, the meaning of the story, he says, the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the sons of light, meaning Christians are not, as a rule, as shrewd about these kinds of machinations that unbelievers are. We just aren't. There's an innocence that characterizes most Christians when it comes to these things, so that it's just not the way they're wired. It's not the way they think. And that leads me into the other reason, and that is that I think that the conservative mindset is generally a mindset that's kind of a live and let live. I'm not peeking in your windows. I don't really care what car you drive. And so long as you're not bothering me, you stay in your lane, I'll stay in mine, and you do what you want, and I'll do what I want. I think that is generally the conservative mindset. That is not the way the left thinks. The left thinks that I want to control you. I am determined. That alone is a wicked mindset. But it's the mindset that says, I want to be in charge so that I can control you. And it's also a mindset of envy. It's driven by jealousy. It's, listen, I think it was Rush Limbaugh who said that the feminist movement was pioneered by ugly women to get back at pretty women. I think there's something in that. I think there's some truth in that. I think that often some of the people that we're dealing with are people who are bitterly unhappy and are determined to get their revenge on society, the in crowd, the popular people, because they weren't part of it. And so we're going to take over these drones who are working at places like Twitter and who are enjoying their immense power to suppress what you say and to control you as a puppeteer, might. These are deeply unhappy people with insidious ideas. I just think the average conservative just doesn't think like this. And most of them are fairly naive when it comes to, what a film like 2000 Mules is laying out, because they're like, oh, wow, that would never occur to me to do that. I just assume I go and vote and I put my ballot in the box.
Right.
And look at what they're doing.
So speaking of bitterly unhappy people, let's talk for a minute about Roe v. Wade.
I thought you were going to say Amber Heard.
Well, we could talk about her too. You pick. Who do you want to talk about first?
Or Roe v. Wade. Let's hear where you're going with that.
Well, I mean, you speak about bitterly unhappy people who worship those who are vehemently for abortion, which, worshiping at the altar of death.
Yeah.
Are losing their minds over what's happened. So how do you see this landscape? Where do you think it's going?
Well, we just saw that the effort to make Roe v. Wade the law of the land was just defeated. So at the national level. So there's that effort going on. What the left doesn't seem to yet, at least the average leftist on social media doesn't seem to understand, is striking down Roe v. Wade does not make abortion illegal nationwide. I wish it did, but it doesn't. What it does is it returns the power to the states to decide what they're going to do regarding that. And hence the reason that you have companies like, by the way, Elon Musk's Tesla and Amazon and Disney offering to pay, what are essentially almost vacation packages to go and go on your abortion vacation. You need to get an abortion and you're in a state that won't let you get one. We'll fly you to New York. You spend all expense paid, in order for you to do it. So the states will have the power and they will target, states with the same kind of tactics that they've used here. By the way, if you notice that abortion is not a referendum, in other words, they target, again, they've always targeted the courts. The left always tries to do an end run on democracy. If there had been national referendum on gay marriage, it would lose. If there had been a national referendum on abortion, it would be a slam dunk loss for the left on these kinds of issues. So that's not what they want. What they want is to radicalize the judiciary and use the judiciary in order to, to get the laws that they want. In this case, it doesn't seem to be working because of Trump's appointees to the federal bench, namely in this case the Supreme Court of the United States. But I think that where this is going, it's going to go to the states. There will be attempts to radicalize judiciaries there and legislators in those states. Furthermore, there will be an attempt to, overturn Roe v. Wade again. Go back in the other direction when, say, a Clarence Thomas, let's say, retires from the bench and is replaced by someone else. So this is where I think that it's going.
Do you think that they will increase the calls? I mean, you think about the court packing and you think about that conversation and you realize how very important it was for Trump to appoint great judges, great justices, rather. Do you think that's real? I mean, do you think that we're going to see a push for that? Or are they going to get obliterated in the midterms? And so that's not going to be an issue right now.
Well, wow. I think they'll get obliterated in the midterms if the elections are fair. So this comes back to, 2000 Mules, because they will cheat like crazy. But do I think that Democrats can win? I don't. And I think they know they can't either. I think they know they have to cheat. They have to cheat in order to get their policies in place. People aren't going to vote for lockdowns. People aren't going to vote for masks. There are people, there are some who will, but those aren't going to win, popular elections. That just isn't going to happen. So they have to legislate it. They have to, radicalize police to enforce the rulings of a radicalized judiciary. These are the things that they need to do. But I think they'll get wiped out in the. And by the way, concerning cheating, did you notice that we are now seeing the Biden administration already trying to condition the American people to get ready for more lockdowns because they're saying that another wave of COVID will hit sometime in the fall? Why do they want that in the fall? They want people locked down so that there have to be mail-in ballots. This is what they did in 2020. They needed people locked down, and they were pushing for mail-in ballots. Joe Biden announced just 2 days ago, we need mail-in ballots. We need mail-in ballots everywhere because they need them to cheat.
Well, and did you hear today that he marked that it was soberly, and it is. One person dying is too many people dying, but 1 million deaths, COVID. Get ready for the next. Again, today, you're right. It's happening like a wave.
They're letting you know we're planning to lock you down come election season. That's what they're planning to do. And I'm wondering if this time around, if Americans will submit to it, because Zachary was telling me that he was in, what do you think of as the most liberal city in America? Just name a few.
New York, Los Angeles, Chicago.
He was in San Francisco, which has got to be far more liberal even than those cities.
Yes, you're right.
And he was in San Francisco at a bar with some friends just to be clear, it wasn't a strip club or anything like that. I just want to be clear on Zachary's behalf. He's a good boy. But he was at a bar in San Francisco when the announcement came out that, the national mask mandate had been struck down, by the way, by a Trump judicial appointee. So these things matter. And he said that the bar owner, who's apparently also the bartender, that he said drinks on the house, ripped his mask off, the big plastic, the plexiglass thing that they put in front of them, that he picked it up and threw it on the ground. Nice. That everybody in the bar was cheering wildly and taking masks off and all this kind of stuff in San Francisco. So you do meet those people who love and worship, wearing that piece of cloth on their face, which the science has yet to demonstrate does anything to prevent you from getting COVID, which is an aerosol, So anyway, we can save that discussion for another time. But even in places like that, people are responding extremely negatively. Right. To masks and positively to having that mandate stricken down. So I'll be curious to see how Americans respond to another effort to lock them down. I don't see the state of Alabama, for instance, my state, or a Florida or a Mississippi or some of these other states going for that. I see them going, nope, we're not doing it. We refuse to do that. I refuse to do that. I will not be locked down.
Now, you mentioned off air about the ABS.
Yes.
This is the
this is Amie Beth Shaver. This is her name, Amie Beth Shaver. And when I think of something she doesn't like, I think of her initials, ABS, which is what pops up on my dashboard when I hit the brakes, automatic braking system. So what is the ABS going off for right now?
All right, here we go. The face diaper.
Yeah, the face diaper.
While you're outside. Is this just me? Well, you're outside.
Yes.
And you see people walking around in a face diaper.
Yes.
I picked up one of our children because she can't drive home from college. Hurts her knee. It's a whole thing. We're outside on the river having dinner. And we're with the girls. And we're enjoying it. And all of a sudden, these very very special looking people come through with their face diapers on, as you do, and sit down at the table. I'm like, what did that do you? You just walked outside, you sat down, and then you took your face mask off.
Yeah, because sitting down, you don't get COVID.
COVID respects the walk.
COVID is at about 4 feet and above.
Yeah, only.
Yes.
And then they sat down, and they were the serious face diaper wearers.
Okay.
With the double strap.
Okay.
Okay. That.
Do you think people like that double condom? I'm just curious.
You never know. I mean, because it's the same
wonder.
people who walk around with the face diaper in
Yeah.
the car while they're by themselves.
That's just interesting. Double glove.
Double all the things.
Yes.
We should probably take a survey.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Anyway, that's my ABS for this week. It drives me nuts. It is all I can do not to approach the people to say, may we have a conversation?
But do you respect their right to do it?
Yes, absolutely.
You respect their right.
Do whatever you want to do.
If you want to do that and look
Stay in
silly,
your lane.
you can do that. But even for me, I just kind of think, let us suppose that it does put me at risk. They're wearing it. What do they care whether or not I'm wearing it? Because supposedly they're protected.
Right.
And if you've been inoculated, then supposedly you're protected again. So why would you care? But I just don't worship my life to that extent.
That's right.
And that's one of the ugly things that's really come out. By the way, and that runs across political boundaries. Is I've been a little embarrassed for the number of men that I've encountered who it feels like. I'm not sure I know exactly how to articulate what I'm saying, but their concern for their life is over the top. Where I'm going, look, this isn't the bubonic plague. So we know that this isn't the bubonic plague. The survival rate is 98% and above if you get it, and I just don't value my life to that extent. I mean, in other words, I'm not saying I can't get it, and you'll see, if I do and I die from it, I'm sure that there will be some leftist magazine that will dunk on me and say, guy who didn't want to wear a mask, dies of COVID. I'm not saying I can't get it or that I can't die from it. I've never been tested positive for it, but I just don't worship my life like that.
Well, and I think I agree with you also that you're right. You can get it. It's serious. It's real. However, I think the other thing I noticed with COVID was how many people also may worship their life, but they also are very fearful.
Yeah.
And trying to talk through that fear. Like, why are you so
That's
afraid?
what I'm talking about. Yeah, the embarrassment I feel for some men
I
with that.
just really, I struggle with that because you want to talk about it, but then there's no reasoning with people who will still double mask and walk in an outdoor restaurant or wear it in their car.
But don't you think it shows the power of media?
Yes.
Because you think that people have enough good sense not to be so influenced by headlines and by scare tactics. And then you go, the reason the media does this is because it is working. It does terrify people. If people knew what dangers they are risking every time they get in an automobile, every time they engage in some kind of risky behavior, alcohol, for example, every time they get the flu, they would be likewise terrified. But media isn't focusing on that. So when media comes along and tells them X number of people, and by the way, if you notice also the CDC has changed their data hugely on the number of deaths. Like, for instance, they slashed the number of infant deaths. They tried to do it very quietly about a month ago, and reducing, I think, by 50% the number of deaths that they had reported in children.
Right.
And go, it was just a statistical error.
Well, and it was also interesting when they slashed that statistic that the kids that did die had underlying health issues, it's horrifying. But they were forced to get honest about it because people started digging in. And I hope that curiosity would continue. But again, I'm bothered by the people that I still see wearing the face diaper.
Well, it was interesting. I was talking to someone who runs a nursing home, and she was telling me that all deaths in the nursing home, they had to attribute to COVID. They had to attribute them to COVID. It's like say if somebody dies in isolation because they don't see their grandchildren or they don't see their children, they're not allowed to see them. They die of really a broken heart. We have to mark it down as a COVID death. So you can see that the numbers are rigged. By the way, speaking of the CDC, going in and out of the country, you have to fill out this form that's a CDC form. And the CDC demands to know your email address and your phone number. And I now know why, because it comes back to this UDID that we were talking about in the first segment. They're using your UDID to see if you are social distancing from other people. You're not even on the plane, but they're tracking where you're going to see whether or not you're going to a ball game, you going to a bar, you going to a concert. Are you social distancing? And that to me is just creepy as hell. They have no right to be doing that. The CDC is an institution that's totally out of control, but that's a completely different thing. Let's talk about Amber Heard and Johnny Depp.
Let's do, because it's been on in my house.
Has it?
Yes, it has.
Well, then you can probably correct, some of my take on it. I'll be curious to know what you think. I am interested in talking about the, Johnny Depp, I guess he's an A-list actor. Would you say that?
I'd say so.
Yeah, and then his ex-wife, a crazy woman by the name of Amber Heard. Is she A-list or is she a B-lister?
I didn't even know her name.
Okay, so that makes her a C-lister.
I'd say C.
If you don't know who she is. I've seen her in, I think only one movie. I saw her in a movie with Kevin Costner called 3 Days to Kill. And
I've seen that.
she plays a femme fatale, in that movie. But what interests me about it is I'm not a Hollywood watcher. I'm the sort of person that if you said, hey, Larry, over your shoulder over there, that's Matt Damon, I would say, okay. I wouldn't cross the room. Now, my wife would quickly say, well, you would if I said, hey, Larry, that's Joe Namath. I'd go, well, okay. I'm going over to say hello to Joe Namath.
Right.
But I have no interest typically in star watching, none whatsoever. And so I haven't watched any of this trial, but what has percolated to the top that I'm hearing and seeing just through social media about this trial that intrigues me is we have had for, I think since probably about 2017, we've had the Me Too movement. And part of the Me Too movement, you'll recall Hillary Clinton saying, believe all women. And that was the narrative, believe all women. Men could not get a fair hearing at all in these things. And that's because every male was interpreted in through the lens of a Harvey Weinstein or a Bill Cosby, drugging women so he could rape them. And in between, you had, guys like, let's say a Matt Lauer, or something like that, and who are not getting, any kind of fair hearing. And by the way, I do not like him, Al Franken, but Al Franken was mistreated horribly by the whole Me Too movement. Conservatives treated him badly because he's a crazy leftist. But his story, I think he was very mistreated. Anyway, all of this is just by way of saying that what has interested me in the Johnny Depp story is I didn't watch the Oscars either, but I know about the slap, Will Smith going up and, hitting Chris Rock. And, and everybody wanted Will Smith dead in the aftermath of that. But then suddenly a video emerges of his wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, videoing him in his house. And he looks like such a broken man, and he keeps asking her, please stop videoing me. I told you not to video me. You're just going to use this for your social media to get hits. You're just using me for your purposes. And he's harassed. And she's so something wicked about what she's doing. And she puts the camera on her and says, see what I'm having to deal with here. And she continues to video him. Suddenly, the public opinion swung in favor of Will Smith. People are going, oh, wow. Will Smith, who seems like such a confident, strong guy, gets up and beats people up on stage. Privately, he seems like a guy who's kind of sweet and absolutely dominated by his wife. Now we have that, coupling that with what's going on with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, is we have the release of audio of Amber Heard shouting at him, admitting that she's been hitting him, admitting that he isn't hitting her, and her daring him. You go to the media, you go public and say that I hit you, and see who believes you. Nobody is going to believe. Meaning, she's acknowledging where things are with me too. She knows I have power over you, cultural power over you, because in this day and age, no one is going to believe a man against a woman. And so the Johnny Depp, Will Smith incidents collectively seem to me to maybe signal a watershed moment where people are starting to reevaluate the nature of power, the nature of influence. And I think that's interesting.
I think it's fascinating, and I think you are correct. I think until people saw that video of Jada Pinkett filming Will, I watched that and felt broken for him.
Yeah.
And I was embarrassed.
And the fact is, she did go put it on her social media. She did. And it is so mean. It is living up to the stereotypical power-hungry, I don't even know, but I thought, great job. Thank you so much. Instead of looking like, here, your husband went to defend you, even though you laughed at what he said, and your husband went to defend you. And, oh, by the way, there's allegations of an open marriage as well. So what does this all open
mean?
Acknowledgments of
right?
I mean, he's a cuckold husband. For sure.
It's unbelievable. And then you hear Amber Heard's testimony and you think, oh my gosh. So I agree. I'm happy that it's beginning. People's eyes are opened to, from the beginning, you probably knew immediately with the Me Too movement, wait a second. This is, it was exposed when Joe Biden's accuser was not allowed to be heard back during the presidential election. But I
believe all women except for her.
Except for her. Don't believe her. She doesn't count. But I hope it's a watershed moment, because I think that it exposed the worst of us, but it also exposes a desperate need for a foundation and a framework and morality. Because what does this mean if we don't have a moral framework? We know this is wrong, but why is it wrong? We feel deeply for these men that were bad. And you think, wait a second, I've got to rethink this here.
Well, sin nature just is not just in the Y chromosome.
That's right.
I mean, all human beings are, we are polluted by sin nature, and you shouldn't believe all women. You shouldn't believe all men. The reality is that all of us, we need accountability. These things need a fair hearing from both sides, and it isn't a case. This is a result, and we just don't have time to get into this, but this is a result of intersectionality, which divides society into power structures, and thus white people are deemed to be more powerful than black people. In any case, that's the way it has to be interpreted. Men are deemed to be more powerful than women. Thus, in any conflict between the two, men are always wrong. White people are always wrong. The employer is always wrong. The heterosexuals are always wrong when it deals with homosexuals, and the immigrant is always going to be the innocent party in any conflict with an American citizen. So it divides society in this kind of way and interprets everything in terms of power structures. And that, by the way, is Marxist. That's Marxism. That's what that is. And so what has disturbed me is how this has penetrated the church, so that you're seeing a lot of churches, and I don't know, for instance, what all happened, with Bill Hybels or Mark Driscoll or some of these other instances, but what has bothered me in how those things were reported is they began using terminology that's not biblical. That's right. And it was being adjudicated. It was being adjudicated in the public. Meaning Christians, we don't adjudicate. I'm not interested in knowing what the New York Times thinks about a conflict in my church. That's not for them to decide. Christians are to deal with things amongst themselves. And that's not what was happening. You had people in Driscoll's church and at Willow Creek who were all running to the media to get them involved. And of course, they have every reason to want to see the main guy, being taken down. So I've found this stuff to be, unsettling.
It's embarrassing as well, especially for people inside of the church. I also think, too, the language of Marxism that's being used by people in the church to try to express to them or ask questions of the root of that language. Like, do you even know what you're saying when you're talking about the intersectionality and the division? Do you know where that came from? And many times they don't. And so I think that we need to do a better job in the church of learning history and learning from history and learning what the words matter.
Yeah.
And ideas matter. But the division that's been sown is very bothersome.
I agree. And now we are down to just seconds of this show. What do you have to say?
I think that it was an interesting adventure. I think that I love your arrival at Mar-a-Lago
Yes.
in the Dodge.
And my departure.
I think that's very, that's like kudos to you for that, right? I think that finding a turtle on my way here, also interesting. I mean, it's riveting, right? And face diapers. Thank God they're mostly gone.
Yes, I am very grateful that they are mostly gone, and they need to be gone. And listen, it has been a great show, and it's been great to have you here to talk about these things with.
Hey, thanks for having me. Everybody, thank you for watching the Larry Alex Taunton Show. Stay tuned. You know what? Hold on. I can't forget. I'm going to do this really fast. You can find us on Podbean, right? Yes. You can find us on Apple Podcast. Give us a 5-star rating. You can find us on YouTube, Rumble. Give us a 5-star. Tell your friends. You know you want to. Stay tuned. See us next time.
Turn out the lights. The party's over. They say that all.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are grateful for the standing ovation, but there will be no encore for today's performance. Please exit the building in an orderly fashion. Thank you.
Honey, can we leave now?